Caitlin Clark yesterday was arguing with referees, and as expected, yeah, they're trying to get her banned. They're trying to get Caitlin Clark suspended. It is genuinely trying to get her
Rival fans are in an uproar, calling for Caitlin Clark to be suspended simply for speaking to referees while sidelined with an injury. Is this the WNBA or a high school drama club? As the face of her team, it's only natural for her to stay engaged from the bench. Yet instead of recognizing her leadership and talent, the league seems to treat her as a threat. Why does Caitlin Clark inspire so much fear instead of admiration?
Not underneath the basket, that was hard to see. The back-to-back, she had her back to her. It was in the open area. At least two of the refs, if not three of them, should have seen that foul. Caitlin pointed to it. They still didn't blow their...
Let's get this straight. Caitlin Clark is injured, barely able to move on one good leg, held together by Hope and KT tape. And this is the moment rival fans choose to call for her suspension. For what, exactly? For talking to referees. For staying engaged in the game like every other star athlete in pro sports history. Since when is showing leadership from the court a punishable offense? Has simply being Caitlin Clark become the WNBA's new version of a flagrant foul?
They're trying to get her suspended. And by the way, this is coming from the same people that try to get her kicked out of the league. So, there's a tweet going semi-viral right now. And by the way, there's a lot more. There is a lot more tweets in this. This is just the one that I've seen. And this is just a funny thing.
This is what happens when the league, the media, and opposing fan bases act like they are allergic to greatness. Like it or not, Caitlin Clark is the headline. She's the reason thousands of new fans are tuning into the WNBA. She's the reason Indiana's arena finally has energy. It no longer sounds like a quiet bingo night, but a real basketball crowd. And yet, instead of celebrating that momentum, rival fans are foaming at the mouth, demanding she be punished. For what? For daring to participate?
But more importantly, do you guys love the WNBA or do you just love Caitlin Clark? We're going to take a deep dive on that because when she got hurt, I was like, well, that's part of sports. She's an athlete. She's going to get hurt. Oh, but the sky started to fall when Caitlin Clark.
Have you ever seen LeBron James limping up and down the court, directing plays and talking to refs? Of course, and no one called for a suspension. When Diana Taurasi spent years fiercely commanding the court and challenging officials, was there ever a movement to bench her? So why is it that when Caitlin Clark does something as ordinary as communicating with referees, it's treated like a scandal? Where's that same outrage for literally every other player? Why are the rules suddenly different for her?
Is literally, so in the last 10 days has called for Caitlin Clark to be investigated for fraud, tagging the WNBA. And again, do you want to know what the funniest thing about all of this is? Is that I would think nothing of this if it wasn't for the fact that WNBA have literally opened an investigation based on Twitter. Well, almost certainly based on...
It's as if the entire WNBA collectively decided one morning, let's go after the one player who's single-handedly elevating the league's visibility by 25%. And no, that's not a made-up figure. That's a real impact. One rookie enters the league, and suddenly every game she plays becomes must-watch TV. So how does the league respond? With silence, with indifference, with a shrug, as if to say, she'll figure it out. Meanwhile, officials and opposing players treat her like a punching bag, as though it's some unofficial rite of passage. Spoiler, it's not. It's neglect. It's cowardice. Ask yourself, why is Caitlin Clark the only player who gets no benefit of the doubt? Why is she held to a standard of perfection, on the court, in her words, in her behavior, while others are free to throw elbows, trash talk, and confront her physically with little to no consequence? Are they different rules for her? Because from where we're sitting, it sure looks that way.
Clark is driving the WNBA insane. It's to the point that she may need to step away from the WNBA, have a billionaire come in that has the money to prove a point, and say, Caitlin, I'll pay you $50 million just to see if the WNBA can make it without you. Let's go create a complete different league and expose the hell out of the WNBA.
Caitlin Clark is sending shockwaves through the WNBA, and the league doesn't seem to know how to handle it. It's gotten to the point where you could almost imagine a billionaire stepping in and saying, Caitlin, here's $50 million. Let's walk away and build something better. Let's see if the WNBA can survive without you. Because right now, it feels like she's carrying the weight of the league on her shoulders, only to be met with resistance at every turn. The WNBA is starting to resemble a bad reality show. Who wants to humble Caitlin Clark this week? The prize: a few fleeting moments of social media applause before disappearing back into obscurity. This isn't about fair play or sportsmanship. It's about fear. The league is afraid. Some players are afraid. Even fans seem unsettled. Why? Because Caitlin Clark doesn't just play the game. She redefines it. Her talent, her poise, and the spotlight she brings are disruptive in the best way. And that kind of power makes people uncomfortable. So what happens? They try to dim her light. They dissect her every move, twist her words, and weaponize the media to portray her as arrogant or entitled. As if speaking up while visibly injured is somehow diva behavior. As if demonstrating leadership under physical pressure is a flaw. Make it make sense, because right now, it doesn't.
It's okay to come on the floor and argue the ref. I can guarantee you the commissioner will think nothing is wrong since it's Clark. And in the last week, that same person has tweeted this. And she was the original person that made the viral tweet. With 1.7 million views, saying you need to take a closer look at why Clark was pressuring her coach to be let back in the game when they were up over 20 points. It resulted in Dave Portnoy placing a bet.
Let's talk about the WNBA itself. Because if this league had even a shred of common sense or the slightest instinct for self-preservation, they'd be protecting Caitlin Clark like a national treasure. At minimum, she'd have a personal security team, some decent officiating, and maybe a little bubble wrap for good measure. Instead, they've stood by while she's blindsided on screens, slammed to the floor, shoved mid-play, and then penalized for reacting like any normal person would. No flagrant fouls, no technicals, no fines, no ejections, and certainly no public statements defending her. Just silence, deafening, calculated silence. Now flip the scenario. Imagine Caitlin Clark sets a hard screen, drops a player, and walks away without blinking. You'd have league officials holding a press conference before the game even ends. Sports networks would play the footage on a loop in slow motion, analyzing her body language like it was the Zapruder film. Commentators would demand apologies, debate suspensions, and flood the timeline with think pieces. But when she's the one getting hit, nothing. No outrage, no protection, no recognition of her value, not just as a generational talent, but as the very engine fueling the league's momentum. And that silence, it speaks volumes.
But what has happened since Caitlin Clark has gotten hurt? Now, it's pretty tough to talk about the viewership because she just got hurt. So the TV ratings haven't come all the way in. But there are some indicators out there, such as there were ticket prices for the next Fever versus Sky matchup. And guess what? They dropped by 71% right after the news of her injury. And then they're talking about the growth of the WNBA, how it's supposed to end it this year. But now that will come to a halt as well, just because of a 2-week injury to Caitlin Clark. Okay. So I've been on here on record saying that it's all about Caitlin Clark for me. And every time I say that, I know the resistance, I know the forces and the headwind against me. You may feel the same way. I hate this world where you just can't.
Which brings us to the obvious question. Is this really the league that claims it wants to grow? Because if this is how the WNBA treats the very player responsible for soaring ratings, sold-out arenas, and record-breaking merchandise sales, then what kind of message are they sending? Right now, it doesn't feel like professional sports. It feels like middle school politics played out on a basketball court. The signal is loud and clear. Caitlin Clark isn't just a threat on the scoreboard. She's a threat to the status quo. And instead of protecting her, the league seems content to hand out brass knuckles to anyone eager to send a message. So how much longer does the WNBA plan to look the other way? How many more elbows to the face, blindsides, and cheap shots will it take before someone in charge stands up and says, enough? Because at this point, it's not just competition, it's targeted harassment, dressed up as tough defense. It's not gritty. It's not admirable. It's jealousy pretending to be hustle. And it's starting to look less like oversight and more like complicity. If the WNBA doesn't act, and fast, they won't just lose control of the narrative. They'll risk losing the best thing that's ever happened to the league. And they'll only have themselves to blame.
You know what she brings to the table. But people wanted to hate because why? You had a bunch of players in this league that watched this young white girl come along and take the league by storm. And they resented it because they saw the marketing prowess that she had. They ignored the fact that you got chartered flights because of this girl. They ignored the fact that ratings were going through the roof because of this girl. Instead, they resented it because they said, yo, we were doing stuff long before Caitlin Clark got here. And y'all wasn't paying attention then. But now the young white girl comes along and y'all want to sit up there and shower all of this praise and all of this attention that was earned before she ever came along. The resentment is understandable, but it's not about Caitlin Clark. It's about what she represents. My point is, grow up. Who cares? If you're Magic and Bird, that didn't stop Jordan from coming along and doing what he